Got it.
All right, and let's kick things off. Reminding folks of the bigger picture, we're working on having some discussions with both some suppliers and some asset managers around, asset owners around, saying, hey, what is this going to look like as we move towards a proof of concept exercise? But we want to make sure that we can continue the community working, and so wanted to bring a teaser or some preliminary work today, which I'll let the team introduce. Ginger, is there anything we want to talk about beforehand before we turn it over to our experts in the labs?
Yes, I do have some silly administrative housekeeping. So again, for those who just joined, as is our practice, we're recording this meeting and we will post that on our website. If that does form an issue, please keep your camera off and just make sure that we're respectful of your needs. Normally for Teams meetings as large as this one turns out to be, I put restrictions in place that prohibit folks from having camera access or mic access. And for this meeting, I have not yet done that. At the end of our presentation, it's important to us that we get your feedback. So I went ahead and left microphones enabled so that you'd have the opportunity to ask questions freely without us having to fidget around with the Teams settings and delay that. However, because you have microphone access, with great power comes great responsibility. Please be thoughtful and mute yourself while our presenters are delivering their knowledge. Use the raise hand signals if you'd like to come in and ask a question, but you do have the power to open your own microphone. And if you're connected by phone, as we all learned during the pandemic, *6 is the magic technology for the phone. Okay, I think that is the housekeeping I had for today. I will keep letting folks in. Jeff, would you like to introduce the team and the concept of transport as we're going to talk about it today?
Yes, thank you, Ginger. So I'm Jeff Mitchell. I'm a project manager at Idaho National Laboratory. Excited to be here. We have a team today that will be discussing software bills and materials transports, or SBOM transports. And we have some just basic assumptions. We assume that everybody has an understanding what an SBOM is. So if you don't know what an SBOM is, we'll be happy to discuss that at another time. But at this time, we'll be kind of pivoting towards how do we transport safely an SBOM. The team that we'll have here today will be sharing an early preview of a paper that the team is developing. The paper is still in draft, but we'll be sharing some initial concepts that we'd love to share with you, and also seek your feedback on any feedback that you might have to share with us, any additional comments that you might have. We look forward to hearing from you on how you and your organization plan to address, or if you've even thought about transporting SBOMs. We'd love to consult with you. The team that is here will be discussing, again, some of the early research as well as some of the feedback they've already gleaned as they've done some outreach and surveys on this particular topic. So we'll have a presentation. Each of the presenters will do an intro of themselves as they lead into their discussion, rather than us all doing a round robin right now. So I'd welcome the team. Make sure you've got cameras on and do your intro before you go through your slides. I think that would be the most efficient use of time as we manage through the slide presentation. So we will hand over initially to Jess Smith. So Jess, if you could start with an intro, and in that time, I'll get the slides pulled up.
Can do. Thank you very much for that intro, Jeff. But I think you hit a lot of my major points there. Yes, I'm Jess Smith. I'm the PM on the PNNL side of this project. This project is a PNNL-INL joint project. So if I say we at any point, it might mean the royal we. I do that from occasionally, but it mostly means this is work done by Idaho National Lab, Pacific Northwest National Lab, I am the lead on the P&L side. However, a lot of the hard work has been done by my team. You'll hear from Tyler here in just a couple of minutes. But my background is engineering and looking at supply chain from that big picture, holistic standpoint. And as part of that, and when we're working through SBOM projects in general, one of our big challenges has always been to share that information. It's kind of the if the tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, does it matter type of question. If somebody creates an SBOM, but nothing ever gets done with it, it never gets shared with the end user or with the researcher, what value has that SBOM got? It still does have value in and of itself, but we can increase that value exponentially by finding ways to share that information. So the original goal of this project was, okay, let's find something that will enable us to do this, to share SBOMs, to share them securely, to share them in an attributable manner without releasing too much data, all sorts of different goals. As we went through that, though, we really struggled. There wasn't any single tool, technique, anything like that that enabled us to do that. So our original goal was to go out and find this thing. As we went through the search, we very quickly found we don't think it's out there to find. There are bits and pieces. There's a lot of different folks doing great work in this area, but not all is one. So we took our original goal, which was to initiate some kind of transport mechanism, and we modified that and said, okay, well, we've said these things don't meet all of our requirements. Well, what are our requirements? Because everybody on the team is coming to this from a different perspective. What are our requirements? What is necessary for an SBOM transport mechanism? So that's been our secondary goal, or our modified goal that we've been focusing on. So what you'll hear for the rest of this presentation is the overview of that. As we've been going through, what is our research? What is our thought process? What are our requirements? And each of the team will have a chance to talk to you here. We do have a more in-depth copy of this in paper format. If you're looking for a little bit of insomnia cure, contact Ginger if you'd like a copy for when we get done. But I think I'm going to pass it off to the awesome folks who are actually doing the hard work. I think, Tyler, you're up first.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Tyler Williams. I'm a cybersecurity researcher with P&L. Today we're going to quickly go over the SBOM and some of their uses. They used to validate software running on systems, used to identify vulnerable systems or vulnerable components running on systems, such as outdated software. And they're machine readable, and which enables very rapid automated analysis of components. With them being so useful, how are they being accessed and shared? Next slide. So that's the transport. So what is transport? In the graphic, we see a very basic boiled down version of a transportation cycle, which would be the author creates an SBOM, and in order to get it to the consumer who's going to utilize that data, they need to send it to them through some sort of transport method. So with NTIA, they describe the method of accessing, transporting the SBOM to the consumer as two parts. So you have a discovery and an access. So what we're trying to do is focus on the most efficient and extensible methods to enable continued and expanded uses within the industry. Next slide. So we conducted a survey. We had 22 respondents. The survey was both questionnaire and interview. And based on the answers, it looked like the main transport mechanism was via secure web portals. And these are normally stored in standardized formats such as SPDX and CycloneDX. So these web portals have three main issues. Normally they're choke points that can lead to reduced availability. And if they may contain only pieces of relevant information. So if a component has an element inside, or if there's a component of an element that has an associated SBOM, might have to go access another vendor's web portal to pull that down. And that can be both time consuming and inefficient. Next slide.
So my name is Jeremy Jones. I'm a critical infrastructure analyst with INL. And sort as Jess alluded to early on, right? If you don't know that an SBOM exists or how to get it, it's not very useful, right? So you need some kind of discovery mechanism to tell you how to or that an SBOM even exists, as well as access methods and information on how to acquire, download, review those SBOMs. Next. So there are multiple ways to do this. The most basic, of course, is manual. A lot of times this will be reading the documentation, maybe emails, maybe you're searching a vendor's website. Of course, these manual discovery methods are a little unreliable. So some automatic methods have been developed. Two of the more common are MUD, manufacturer usage description, and pub-sub architectures that are being developed to help consumers find and access SBOMs. Next. Manufacturer usage description, MUD. It's an interesting new technology that's being developed or has been developed. I'm sorry, largely around IoT. It's a mechanism that allows other networking components to discover information about an IoT device. For the most part, this has been used for, like to tell your network router, your home personal router kind of stuff, what kind of network access IoT devices would need. The interesting thing, though, is that this is being extended with SBOM support, right? So that as you obtain the information from your IoT device, how to access, download an SBOM for that device can be included. Now that can either be on the device itself, or maybe it's a URL pointing to the manufacturer website, or possibly some kind of cloud access or something like that. Next. In a more sort of generic sense, several vendors that we talked to are developing kind of pub-sub models for their own applications that provide SBOM information. This allows a consumer to subscribe to SBOM information, right? So as an SBOM changes, that information is provided to the consumer. Unfortunately, there is one small limitation with pub-sub, and that's initial discovery, which is interesting because it feeds back into the MUD model, right? So you can use MUD information for initial discovery, and then set up a pub-sub architecture or connect to subscribe to the SBOM for updates. Next.
Yeah, so there's just a guide.
Next. Oh, I'm sorry. So in addition to getting the SBOM, of course, there's this whole concern about data confidentiality. In some cases, the SBOM information may be public, maybe it's for open source software or some kind of open source component where the manufacturer doesn't really mind sharing that information. But in a lot of cases, and especially when you start talking about, the energy sector, the kinds of devices we have here, manufacturers may not be interested in sharing any of that information with the public. Furthermore, the consumer of those SBombs may want to actually know or have some mechanism for verifying that the information they're receiving is the information that the vendor intends for them to receive. And of course, the most effective way to do this is by using existing cryptographic mechanisms, right? So, applying cryptographic hashes for validation or general encryption to encrypt an SBOM, with shared keys or, other or maybe public keys, so that the consumer can then receive that SBOM. It can receive that SBOM safely, securely, and verify that the information contained within that SBOM is in fact the information that the vendor intended for them to have. Next. And finally, once you have an SBOM, you need to store it. You need to have it stored someplace so that you can use it, reference that information as you need it. There's a couple of ways to encode it, the most common being JSON and XML. And there's two really common formats, CycloneDX, of course, and SPDX. These are the two most common formats. And the real interesting thing about SBombs, of course, is that they have sort of a shape to them. And I apologize, this is sort of my computer science background coming out a little bit. So the shape of an SBOM is kind of relational, a little bit kind of hierarchical. So things like relational databases actually lend themselves really well to storing SBOM information and storing it in a way that you can ask really interesting questions about the data within the SBOM. Like, for instance, what I heard that a component has a particular vulnerability. If you've stored that information, hierarchical, in the natural shape of the SBOM, you can then ask your storage system, hey, do I have any devices that has this component as part of it, or this subcomponent as part of it? And then you get back these answers, and then you can act on that information. Next.
All right. Normally when we discuss attestations, think about how we will add attributes to different components or elements within the SBOM. But within the transportation of SBombs, these attestations can be in the form of integrity checking mechanisms to ensure that the SBOM hasn't been tampered with in transit. Those can be in the form of digital signatures or files checksums. Another could be linking of components within the SBOM that have separate associated SBombs within for other components that are contained. That also adds in the discovery process. And then depending on the complexity of the transportation method, it can be as simple as just an email read receipt, file tracking on your secure web portal, see who's downloaded the files or to ensure that they've been downloaded, or complex, such as a blockchain transaction ID. Up next, I'm going to hand it off to Jeremiah. He's going to go over some of the details of the market survey.
Good morning. My name is Jeremiah Stoddard, and I'm a critical infrastructure analyst from Idaho National Laboratory. I currently work as a jack of all trades on many different SBOM projects, and I am looking at the different participants, and I have been able to luckily work with many of you based on the task I was given, which was to survey a number of SBOM stakeholders on transportation. So 39 organizations were emailed an invitation to discuss the details of how organizations transport SBOMs. The invitation elicited 22 responses and counting, and included a number of organizations that create platforms with SBOM storage and transport functionality. I have to say from the very top that we're very appreciative of the different survey participants that gave of their time and attention. And we continue to receive feedback from different participants that will give their responses. So it is an ongoing process. In fact, if you've not been contacted for the survey but would like to participate, I would love to talk to you. So there's never a bad time to increase the number of people that give their feedback. So the market survey focused on understanding the different ways the private sector transports SBOMs. Once the information from the respondents was collected, analyzed, and summarized, it became apparent that the transportation solutions need to be grouped into 3 categories. After consideration, the paper used the following categories: point-to-point transportation, multi-point transportation, and other. Now for the multi-point transportation, it might be point to multi-point or multi-point to multi-point, but we just put it into the multi-point transportation group. While I talked to a lot of people that created a lot of great products, the trend seemed to be that people were utilizing existing infrastructure while they determined their needs. In fact, one respondent said, "We are waiting for the SBOM market to coalesce and mature around formats, transportation, and storage." And so you saw a lot of people utilizing what they had. Just generally, I would say a lot of great discussions on openness and still a lot of interest in non-disclosure agreements. So a lot of good conversations had. Next slide. The first one is point-to-point transportation. I would say this is something that interested me in that one survey participant really pointed out that a conversation can be had between supplier and asset owner when a supplier is looking to understand the impact of a particular vulnerability. And that conversation, when the asset owner's exact product and dependencies are deduced by the supplier, can basically provide a verbal SBOM. Now, this particular style of communication might be good in the short term, but it is probably to be considered the least efficient method currently used. With that said, email was also another one that was used on a regular basis. When it came to security, the body or attachment of the email could have been encrypted, as well as the connection to a given email server. It just depended on how open the participant wanted to be with their SBOM. Next slide, please. Next, let's talk about multi-point transportation. Some organizations use customer web-based service portals to access technical information such as SBOM, and they're not creating anything new. They're using what they already have to provide customers with technical information and just adding SBOMs. Some suppliers distribute SBOMs on an existing public-facing support website. These particular participants had a different philosophy on SBOMs than others and were willing to share their SBOMs publicly. For that reason, it was going to be shared just on the website. Some suppliers utilize remote accessible file systems in different ways, whether that be Dropbox, Box.com, or S3 buckets. The solution was demonstrated in a number of ways. Sometimes there was a link via email to Dropbox. Others integrated S3 buckets into a platform. There were also quite a few individuals that were looking at API calls to help move transportation. Next slide, please. We use this category of other because we are very aware of different solutions that do not fit perfectly within a tidy category. And that's why we allowed the other category to coexist. Some tools were specific to SBOM storage and transport, while other tools had other primary purposes like risk intelligence, where SBOM storage was important, but not necessarily the primary output of the tool. All of the tools, regardless of primary purpose, did allow users to transport SBOMs to others. A good example of this, based on our contact with the Digital Bill of Materials Consortium Linux Foundation project, was the SBOM tool, which allows an SBOM owner to use open source software nodes. Now, the reason I bring this up is that the tool was evaluated by members of the group from INL and PNNL through the Citrix project. So there's just a note there. Next slide, please. So with an evolving SBOM landscape, realistically, any prediction at this current point on a single marketplace solution or approach will be difficult. For that, we really appreciate the diversity of solutions, and interoperability will necessarily be an important part of that because of the diversity of solutions that hopefully will have a true benefit to consumers. Now, as I reflected on what I had done, here are some of the different things that I thought would be important as we went forward. First, we would like to see an increase of participants in future surveys and a variety of different participants so that we can really understand the SBOM landscape through a diverse number of companies and coming from different sectors. It would be very valuable going forward to have discussions with different participants on attestation, encryption at rest, encryption in transit, blockchain, interoperability, the formatting standards, scalability, multi-source aggregation, public-facing SBOMs, analysis capabilities, cost of tools, auditability, and access controls. And finally, one of the main reasons that we want to do this is we want to understand what tools are missing from the landscape, because we really would like to drive innovation. Go ahead to the next slide, and I believe that's all for me.
All right, thank you all for your participation and for providing early visibility to the research that you're all performing. Wanted to hand off to Alan at this point. He is helping us to sort of refine the work that we're doing, and I'll hand over to Alan to seek feedback and suggestions.
Thanks so much, and thank you to the INL and PNL team for sort of really starting the ball rolling on this. How are we going to move this stuff around has been one of the big questions that we've heard, and you know, I think you and your team have done a really good job of helping to frame this question, and we're looking forward to having the sort of the final version be published. It's going to have to go through a couple of hurdles on our end. Many of you know the joys of bureaucracy, but we're also very excited in that we're hoping to be able to publish this as a joint Department of Energy and CISA publication. And those of you who track this know that being able to get point to interagency collaboration is one of those things that the brass like. So right now we'd love to get feedback, comments, questions, further suggestions, and we'll do this by using the hand raise model. If that doesn't work for you, you can chime in the chat. If that still doesn't work, then we'll find some other mechanism. While folks sort of reopen their team's model to sort of figure out how it works, I see there was a comment from Mike Jenkinson, and while we're not, we try to make sure this is a right, not a promotional zone for any one product. You flagged that CSMII has some work undergoing. Could you, Jenkinson, sorry, Mike, could you sort of pop off and maybe give like a 2-minute summary of what that is?
Yes, actually it has nothing to do with Siemens, but it's a group that is also sponsored by the DOE. It's called SESMI. Essentially, their goal in a lot of ways is very parallel to what you folks have been discussing. They're looking, without getting into too much of their technology, they are essentially trying to find, as part of an Industry 4.0 method in energy savings, a way to uniquely identify or tag a device. And what they have talked about is the idea of creating a layer of information just above a proprietary layer, and be able to basically store information so that it can be read like a computer code could be read. And all when you guys were talking about this and the transport and everything else, I thought, wow, I was just thinking out loud, quite honestly. Would it be interesting to see if what you're doing with regards to SBOM transport could be built into what SESME is trying to achieve at the same time?
We will we'll reach out if you have a link to anything about that working group, so that
Yeah,
others
actually,
can learn
yeah,
more.
I could.
That'd be great.
I could get Steve Winsky, who's sort of there. He could explain and bring the right people together to talk to you about that, Alan. Yeah.
Thank you. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
And someone reminded me in the chat that if you're on the phone, you can't raise your hand. *6 will get you in the queue. I was about to respond to that in the chat, then realized if you're on the phone, putting something in the chat isn't terribly helpful for you. So thank you, Mike, for flagging that. And I think this is just as a important way of referencing this, the broader challenge of saying, hey, we're going to have a lot of supply chain data beyond SBOM is going to be, so the solutions that we're working on probably are going to have a number of different approaches as well. So as sort of more and more folks say, hey, we need to know more information about our supply chain in different contexts. Anyone have further thoughts or ideas or anything that you want to share, or questions for the research team? I don't see any hands raised at the moment. So Duncan chimes in with a good question. Duncan, do you want to sort of ask that, unmute yourself and ask that if you like, or I can ask it for you?
I can unmute myself, I guess, so I just did. So SBOMs come from the vendor, and a lot of the comments that got made were under the assumption that the only source of an SBOM is a vendor. There are other, and again, this might be not a crawl issue, this might be a run issue or whatever, but there are alternate sources of SBOMs, particularly for products that have the vendors disappeared. There plus also, even when you do have the one from the vendor, sometimes that analysis tool will give you other information. Are you looking at all of them, or is that sort of beyond the scope at this point?
It's a fun question. I'll turn that over to the National Labs team. Is this something that was on your radar?
So this is Jeff Mitchell. I'll take that one. So I can tell you from another project that we are actively working on that was alluded to earlier, Citrix program, we're developing software bills of materials. And so we're aware of the need and the use case of, sometimes that SBOM doesn't just magically come from a vendor, that sometimes there's other scenarios that need to be considered. As far as this specific research on transporting those, I don't believe that use case has actually been fully vetted out in this paper, but I would lean and welcome insight from other members of the team. Thank you.
And Duncan, I think to another point on that is that sort of underscores the importance of saying whatever solutions folks are starting to use, we should really emphasize the importance of interoperability. And I think that's one of the points that I try to make on this transport question is It's unlikely that we're going to have a single solution, especially for the first few years. And so as folks sort of develop it and think about what they want, we should sort of emphasize, as we saw today, emphasizing interoperability as a design goal.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely for interoperability. And there's sort of two parts to the question I asked. One part is just the fact there are alternate sources, and sometimes it's the alternate source is the only source. But sometimes there's also multiple sources, and particularly if you're talking transport, you might have to handle the greater than one issue separately than one only issue. So again, just something to consider, that you might have the SBOM from the vendor and the SBOM from INL or APL or some other security researcher that did it. So it's just something to consider at some point you'll have to deal with. Over.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great point.
Jess Smith, did you want to touch on that at all? She may not be available, but I can tell you that is also another scenario that we've encountered on the Citrix program of having multiple bills of materials and having to compare, and how does one differentiate which one is right? You definitely a great item that you bring up, Duncan, that we're considering. So thank you for raising that.
Anyone else have something noteworthy that they want to say, or how you have been thinking about this? Is there anyone who sort of said, "Hey, this is how we in our organization are trying to tackle this"? So, Josh, you've chimed in the chat. So you share on request. Do you mind telling us sort of a little bit about the mechanism that you use?
Sure. We will share it on request with customers. Not just like if they say, "Oh yeah, we'd also like to see your SBOM." Like if they seriously request it and aren't just kind of saying it'd be nice to have, we'll share it, but we share it via our secure file transfer tool, which is how we actually share our software because it's not publicly available. So we use the same encrypted tool that is password protected, and only designated people from the other side are allowed to log in. And all this is after we've completed a contract and they've signed their NDA.
And just to tease on one of those points, it's by the human, not by the organization. Is that right?
Correct. We make sure that they understand that it's only certain people that should share it, and that's part of the NDA for specifically our SBOM. And that it's not just like a project manager that's looking at it, it's somebody who would understand what they're looking at. We verify that.
Thanks. Duncan, I see that you want to chime in on PACE, which would be great in a moment. Just very briefly, yes, to answer Jim's question, we are going to be, this is recorded, and we hope to have some of the slides available as well at the SBOM website. Okay, Duncan, you've done some work on sort of a broader automation system that includes SBOM. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, this is Duncan Sparrow. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the chair of the OASIS OpenC2 Technical Committee, and that's sort of where my interest in this other project comes from. There is an OASIS Open project called PACE, which is for Posture Attribute Collection and Evaluation, and it's for broader than SBOM. It's basically for all security, it's for determining your security posture. It's sort of a follow-on to some of the SCAP work, if some of you are familiar with that. It was spearheaded by the NSA Cyber Directorate, Neil Ziering's organization. He's sort of the tech lead there that's sort of really into this automation at scale issue for cybersecurity. And out of that work came this PACE project. That's just the acronym for Posture Attribute Collection and Evaluation in OASIS Open, that's looking to try and sort of solve the bigger picture issue, of which SBOMs are one piece of, but the sort of focus to begin with is on SBOMs, vexes, and vulnerabilities, because it is obviously a major piece of endpoint posture security. So that is an effort going on. If people are interested in that, I can provide you more info on the website and all that sort of stuff. Over. I'll put a link in the chat.
Thanks, Duncan. And for those who don't know, OASIS Open is a international standards organization. So good to sort of see the formal standards coming out there. Any further comments about how you have thought about this? Anyone is on the asset owner side and wants to sort of chime in about how you get other types of data today? Could be about general, other types of data, maybe support models, but other than SBombs themselves. Okay. This is, for the fact, first, thank you to those of you who worked with the National Labs teams for providing input. If you have further input, please reach out through me or Ginger, and we'll definitely connect you to the team. Very helpful, thank you. Is there any last words from the research team, Jeffrey?
I don't have anything else to add other than I echo your thank you out to all those who have participated and provided feedback today. We really welcome your feedback, especially as we post this information and make it available. We'll look forward to any additional insight that you might share with us that we can continue to mature this research. So thank you all. And thanks, Alan. And the other thing that I will flag is we're excited about this research because we'd like to use it as a foundation for the further CISA work on advancing SBOM, and we think that this could be sort of a common starting point as we try to explore collectively from a community level what we can do to advance the notion and bring together some of the existing solution providers and solutions to sort of make sure that there is interoperability. So before we wrap up, I just want to give a tip of the hat to a friend, Tomo Ito, who is in Tokyo. As many of you know, Japan is critical infrastructure folks are busy working very hard today to manage the fallout from the earthquake. We hope everyone's safe. Tomo had to go out and find a place with power in his neighborhood so that he could join. So I'm going to embarrass you by thanking you for the dedication to joining this. We really enjoy the partnership of JP Search and you in particular, Tomo, so thank you. With that said, that's it for today. So we will follow up with the next plan to share how we can continue sort of the broader education around the SBOM work and all of the myriad parts of that ecosystem as we move forward. So keep an eye on your inbox for some information from Ginger and I. I think that is it for today. So we get a few minutes of our day back. Thanks. Have a great afternoon, great morning, great evening. Thank you.